Sam drove his old pickup truck along the narrow mountain road, his eyes moving between the tall pine trees that lined the path. The air felt colder than usual, and the wind carried the smell of rain. He had not planned to come back to his cabin this early. In fact, his trip to the city was supposed to keep him away for another 2 weeks. But things had changed at work, and now he had some free time. The cabin, hidden deep in the woods, was his safe place. He looked forward to quiet evenings by the fireplace, long walks on the trails, and mornings filled with birdsong. As the truck climbed the last hill, Sam smiled to himself. Nobody knew he was coming back early. He thought about how peaceful the cabin would feel after days in the noisy city. He imagined setting down his bags, starting a small fire, and brewing fresh coffee. But when the roof of the cabin came into view through the trees, his smile slowly faded. Something felt wrong. The front porch light was on. Sam was sure he had turned off every light before leaving. He parked the truck quietly and stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. The forest was silent except for the distant call of an owl. He stood still for a moment, listening. Then he noticed something else: smoke rising from the chimney. His cabin was not empty. Sam felt his chest tighten. Who could be inside? He walked slowly toward the cabin, careful not to make noise. As he got closer, he saw curtains pulled across the windows. Those curtains had been open when he left. He reached the steps of the porch and stopped. From inside came the faint sound of a television. Someone had been living in his cabin. Before Sam could decide what to do, a sudden shout came from behind him. "Excuse me. What are you doing here?" Sam turned quickly. A woman stood on the path, holding a phone in her hand. She wore a heavy coat even though the weather was not too cold. Her face was sharp, and her eyes narrowed with suspicion. Sam did not recognize her, but she spoke with confidence as if she owned the place. "I live here," Sam replied, his voice calm but firm. "This is my cabin." The woman shook her head. "No, this cabin is under the watch of the homeowners association. I've been keeping an eye on it. And you breaking in at night look very suspicious. I'm calling the police." Sam frowned. "You don't understand. This is my property. My name is on the deed. I built half the porch with my own hands." "Who are you?" The woman lifted her chin. "Karen. I'm the HOA supervisor for this area. You can't just walk in like you own the place." Sam almost laughed at the words, but his anger held him back. He could not believe what he was hearing. "Because I do own the place," he said slowly. "Now tell me why the lights are on and why there's smoke in my chimney." Karen crossed her arms. "I've been staying here to make sure everything is fine. You were gone, and empty cabins attract trouble. I took responsibility." Sam's jaw tightened. She had been living in his cabin for 2 weeks, without permission. And now, instead of admitting the truth, she was calling the police on him. The sound of sirens reached through the trees. Karen's call had already gone through. Sam stood on the porch, looking at the woman who had taken over his home. His mind raced with questions. What had she been doing inside his cabin? Had she touched his things? Had she changed anything? As red and blue lights began to flash in the distance, Sam knew the night was about to become far more complicated than he had ever expected. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the trees, bouncing across the walls of the cabin. Sam stood still on the porch, his hands at his sides, trying to stay calm. He had done nothing wrong. This was his property, and yet somehow he was the one about to be questioned like a stranger. Karen waved her phone in the air and pointed toward Sam as the police car pulled into the gravel path. "That's him," she shouted. "That's the intruder." Sam clenched his teeth but kept silent. The car stopped, and two officers stepped out. One was tall with a steady gaze, and the other looked younger, his hand already resting on his belt. They approached carefully, their flashlights cutting across the porch. "Sir, step away from the door," the tall officer said firmly. Sam raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "Officers, this is my cabin. My name is Sam. I own this place. I just got back today, and I found her," he nodded at Karen, "living here without my permission." Karen scoffed loudly. "Don't believe him. I've been watching this place for 2 weeks. It was abandoned. He's trying to take it?" The younger officer frowned. "We'll need identification." Sam nodded. He reached slowly into his coat and pulled out his wallet. He handed over his driver's license. The tall officer studied it, then looked at Sam again. "Do you have proof this cabin is yours?" "In my truck," Sam said quickly. "I keep copies of the deed and the property tax bill in a folder. I can get them for you." Karen interrupted before the officer could answer. "Don't let him go anywhere. He could be hiding something. This whole situation is dangerous." The tall officer raised a hand to silence her. "Ma'am, let us handle this. We'll verify his story." He turned back to Sam. "Go ahead and get your papers." Slowly, Sam walked to his truck, his boots crunching on the gravel. He opened the glove compartment and pulled out the folder. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from frustration. He returned to the porch and handed the papers to the officer. The officer shined his flashlight over the documents, reading carefully. The younger officer stepped closer to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have any proof that you're supposed to be staying here?" Karen stiffened. "I don't need papers. I'm part of the HOA. My word should be enough." "That's not how it works," the officer replied calmly. "If this man's documents check out, then he's the legal owner." Sam crossed his arms and waited. The tall officer finally looked up. "The name matches the ID. The deed lists this cabin, and the tax bill is current. Seems clear to me. This is his property." Karen's face turned red. "You can't be serious. I've been taking care of this place. I cleaned, I paid attention to noises, I even trimmed the bushes out front. And you're just going to let him walk in?" The younger officer's voice grew firm. "Ma'am, you've been living in someone else's property without permission. That could be considered trespassing." Sam felt a wave of relief, but it was mixed with anger. "I want to know what she's been doing inside my cabin," he said. The officers exchanged a glance. The tall one nodded. "We'll take a look." "Ma'am, step aside." Karen opened her mouth to argue but stopped when the officer's hand moved slightly closer to his belt. She stepped down from the porch, muttering under her breath. Sam pushed open the cabin door and flicked on the light. His stomach dropped. The living room was a mess. His blankets were thrown across the couch, dishes filled the sink, and the coffee table was covered with papers that weren't his. A half-eaten pizza sat on a plate, cold and stale. The younger officer looked around with raised eyebrows. "Doesn't look like she was just watching the place." Sam walked slowly through the room, noticing more. His books had been moved, his tools scattered, even the photos of his parents on the shelf had been touched. He felt anger burn in his chest. Karen shouted from outside. I only used what was necessary. You should be thanking me. Sam ignored her and turned to the officers. What happens now? The tall officer sighed. We'll file a report. If you want, you can press charges for trespassing. For now, she needs to leave this property immediately. Sam nodded firmly. Yes, she leaves tonight. Karen gasped as if the idea was unthinkable. Where am I supposed to go? It's dark, it's late, and I've been living here. The younger officer's tone was cold. That's not his problem. Pack your things. As Karen's protests echoed into the night, Sam stood in the middle of his own cabin, wondering just how deep this mess went. Something told him this was not over. Karen stomped back into the cabin as if the officers had not spoken. Her shoes dragged against the wooden floor, and she slammed drawers as she began pulling out items that clearly did not belong to her. Sam stood by the door, his arms crossed, his eyes following her every move. He felt the heat of his anger rising, but he forced himself to stay calm. This was his home. Losing his temper would only give her more reason to argue. The younger officer stepped inside. Ma'am, you need to gather only your belongings. Do not touch anything that is not yours. Karen spun around, her face red. Everything here is mine now. I improved this cabin. I made it livable. He left it empty. That means it was abandoned. Sam shook his head slowly. You call leaving for a few weeks abandonment? I've lived here for years. This cabin has been in my family since my grandfather. The tall officer walked in, his voice steady but firm. Ma'am, this man owns the cabin legally. If you continue to resist, you could be arrested. Do you understand? Karen pressed her lips tight and threw a blanket into a bag. Fine, she muttered. But her eyes burned with anger as if she were planning something more. Sam stepped into the kitchen to see the damage. His cupboards were half empty, his food gone. A jar of coins he kept for emergencies had been opened, and only a few coins were left inside. He clenched his fists. She had not just stayed in his home, she had taken from him. The officers kept watch as Karen stuffed clothes, shoes, and a pile of papers into 2 large bags. Finally, she marched toward the door. This is not the end, she said sharply. You'll regret treating me this way. Sam met her glare with steady eyes. No, what I regret is coming home to find a stranger in my cabin. You brought this on yourself. The officers escorted her outside to the police car. The younger one spoke softly to Sam. She'll have to find somewhere else for the night. If she tries to come back, call us immediately. Sam nodded, though inside he doubted it would be that simple. Karen did not seem like someone who would give up easily. The police car pulled away, its lights vanishing into the dark road. The forest grew quiet again, but it was no longer the peaceful silence Sam had imagined before. Now the cabin felt uneasy, as if Karen's presence still lingered in the walls. He walked through every room, checking for missing items. In the bedroom, his clothes were scattered and his drawers left half open. The bathroom smelled of perfume that was not his. Even the small workshop at the back had been disturbed. Tools were missing, and his workbench was covered in dust from projects he had never started. Sam sat down heavily on the couch. He rubbed his face with his hands. What kind of person just moved into someone else's home and acted like it was hers? And what did she mean by this is not the end? He thought about calling a friend from town to come stay the night, but then decided against it. He did not want anyone else to get dragged into this strange fight. Instead, he locked every window, checked the doors twice, and set a chair against the front door before heading to bed. Sleep did not come easy. Every crack of the cabin, every sway of the trees outside made him sit up and listen. He kept thinking of Karen's angry eyes, the way she had spoken as if she had a claim to the place. By morning, the sun streamed through the curtains. Sam brewed coffee and stepped onto the porch. For a moment, the mountain air cleared his head. But then he noticed something unusual on the porch railing. A folded note. He picked it up carefully. The paper was plain, written in rushed handwriting. "You don't deserve this cabin. It belongs to people who care. I'll make sure you leave." Sam stared at the note, his jaw tightening. She had been back already, or maybe she had left it before the police drove her away. Either way, it was clear Karen had no plan of letting this go. He folded the note, put it in his pocket, and looked out at the trees. Trouble was not behind him. It was just beginning. Sam kept the note in his pocket all morning. He read it again and again, each time feeling the same anger rise in his chest. Someone had crossed the line. It was not only about living in his cabin anymore. Karen wanted him gone. He decided to drive into town to report the note at the sheriff's office. When he arrived, the same tall officer from last night was behind the desk. Sam placed the paper in front of him. The officer read it slowly and sighed. "Looks like she doesn't plan to let this go. Don't worry, we'll keep it on record. If she shows up again, we'll take stronger action." Sam nodded, though he noticed the officer's calm tone. It sounded routine to him, but to Sam, it was his home and safety on the line. He thanked the officer and left. On the way back to the cabin, Sam passed through the small community that lay just below the mountain. A cluster of houses stood there, neat and similar, each one with trimmed lawns and matching fences. A wooden sign at the entrance read, "Pine Grove Homeowners Association." Sam had never liked HOAs. That was why he had chosen to live outside their control. His cabin was older, built before the community was formed, and the land had stayed in his family. Yet, he now realized Karen must have come from here. As he slowed at a stop sign, he saw her. Karen was standing near the community office, speaking with a group of 3 people. She pointed toward the mountains while waving her hands as if telling a dramatic story. The others listened closely, frowning and nodding. Sam felt a chill. She was rallying support. He continued driving, not wanting her to notice him. By the time he returned to the cabin, his mind was heavy with thoughts. If Karen convinced the HOA board that his cabin somehow threatened their rules, they might make his life miserable. He had heard stories of HOAs dragging people into endless disputes. Later that afternoon, a knock echoed at his door. Sam tensed, half expecting Karen again. But when he opened it, a man in a suit stood outside. He carried a folder in one hand and smiled politely. "Good afternoon," the man said. "I'm Mr. Green, a representative of the Pine Grove HOA. I'd like to talk about your cabin." Sam raised an eyebrow. "My cabin is not part of the HOA." Mr. Green nodded. "That's true, but it sits close to the community. Some of our members have expressed concerns about its condition, its safety, and how it affects property values." Sam laughed without humor. "So Karen sent you?" Mr. Green kept his polite smile. "I cannot discuss who raised the issue, but yes, there have been complaints. The HOA would like to invite you to a meeting tomorrow evening." We believe cooperation is best for everyone. Sam leaned against the doorframe. Let me be clear. This cabin belongs to me. It is private property. I have no interest in your HOA meetings. The man's smile faded slightly. I understand, but ignoring the community is unwise. Tensions grow quickly. Please consider attending. He handed Sam a paper with the time and address, then walked back down the path without waiting for an answer. Sam closed the door hard. His mind raced. Karen was using the HOA to push him out, to turn the community against him. That night, Sam checked the locks again. He sat by the fire, staring at the paper the man had left. A meeting could mean trouble, but avoiding it might be worse. If Karen spread lies about him, and he was not there to defend himself, things could spiral quickly. The next day, as the sun set, Sam dressed in a clean shirt and drove to Pine Grove. The community hall was lit brightly, and rows of chairs were filled with residents. At the front sat a small board of members. And there, in the second row, was Karen. She turned, saw Sam, and smirked as if she had already won. Sam took a seat near the back. He could feel eyes turning toward him, whispers starting to spread. The board leader cleared his throat and tapped the microphone. Tonight, he said, we will discuss the issue of the mountain cabin and whether it poses a problem for Pine Grove. Sam folded his arms, steadying his breath. He knew this was the fight Karen had prepared for. The real battle for his home was about to begin. The room grew quiet as the board leader adjusted his glasses and looked down at the papers in front of him. We've received complaints about the cabin near the Northridge, he began. Concerns include safety, appearance, and whether the property is being managed properly. Tonight, we'll hear comments from members before we decide what action, if any, should be taken. Whispers spread across the hall. Sam sat in the back, his shoulders squared, his face calm though his chest felt tight. He knew who had started the complaints. The board leader looked around. Would anyone like to speak first? Karen's hand shot up immediately. She rose from her chair, her posture stiff and her expression sharp. Yes, I will, she said loudly. She turned toward the crowd, her voice carrying with practiced confidence. That cabin has been abandoned for years, she declared. I lived there myself for 2 weeks, and not once did I see the owner check on it. The place was falling apart, unsafe, and attracting strangers. I had to protect the community by moving in. Murmurs rose in the room. A woman in the front row nodded in agreement. Karen continued, her voice louder. This man, she pointed to the back where Sam sat, claims it belongs to him, but where has he been? Absent. Neglectful. And when I cared for the property, he treated me like a criminal. Is that fair? Should we allow one person's poor management to harm our community? The crowd stirred with mixed reactions. Some nodded, others frowned. Sam stood slowly, his tall frame drawing attention. He waited until the whispers settled, then spoke in a clear, steady tone. I am the owner of that cabin. My name is Sam. It has been in my family since before this neighborhood even existed. I was away for work, not abandoning it. When I returned, I found her inside living there without my permission. Gasps spread across the hall. Karen's face turned red. That's not true. He left it open, unsafe. I simply made use of a place that had no care. Sam shook his head. I locked my doors. I left everything in order. When I returned, my belongings had been used, my food eaten, my tools stolen. That is not care. That is trespassing. The board leader raised his hand for silence. Both sides will be heard. Does anyone else wish to comment? An older man from the second row stood. His voice was calm. I've lived in Pine Grove for 20 years. I walk the Ridge Trail often. That cabin has never been abandoned. I've seen Sam there many times, fixing the roof, cutting wood, keeping it neat. I don't think he's lying. Another woman stood. I agree. I pass the road that leads to the cabin. It's private property. The HOA should not interfere. We have our own houses to manage. Karen's eyes flashed with frustration. She raised her voice again. If we let him stay, it lowers our values. Look at the cabin, it doesn't match our style. It doesn't follow our rules. We need to act before the whole area suffers. Sam stepped forward. Your rules do not apply to me. My land is outside the HOA boundary. I don't pay fees, and I don't answer to your board. This is simple, it is my home. I won't be bullied out of it. The hall filled with whispers again. The board leader tapped the microphone. Order, please. He looked at both Sam and Karen. It's clear there is strong disagreement here. But let me remind everyone our authority ends at the community line. That cabin is private land. Unless there is a legal issue, we cannot decide what happens there. Karen gasped. So you're just going to let him do whatever he wants? The board leader nodded firmly. Yes. Because it is his right as the owner. Applause broke out from several seats. Karen's face twisted with anger, but she sat down hard in her chair, muttering under her breath. Sam remained standing for a moment, then spoke one last time. I understand your concerns. But I take care of my home, and I will continue to do so. All I ask is that my privacy is respected. The meeting ended shortly after. People left in small groups, some glancing at Sam with respect, others still whispering to each other. Karen left quickly, her eyes cold, her fists clenched. As Sam walked out into the night air, he felt a measure of relief. The board had sided with him, or at least respected his rights. But deep inside, he knew Karen was not finished. The way she had looked at him promised more trouble ahead. Sam drove back to the cabin after the meeting, the road winding through the dark forest. The headlights cut through the trees, but his mind was still at the hall. The board had spoken clearly, his property was his own, but Karen's expression haunted him. She had looked not defeated but determined. When he reached the cabin, the night was quiet. He parked the truck and walked onto the porch. For a moment, he thought everything was fine. But then he noticed the door frame. A fresh scratch ran along the wood, as if someone had tried to force the lock. Sam's stomach sank. He quickly unlocked the door and stepped inside. His eyes moved across the room. Nothing seemed stolen this time, but the chair he had placed against the door the night before was pushed aside. Someone had been inside again. He walked through each room, checking carefully. A drawer in the bedroom was open. His workshop window was unlatched. On the kitchen counter lay another note, written in the same rushed handwriting as before. You can hide behind papers and meetings, but this cabin will never be yours. I'll prove it. Sam folded the note, his jaw tight. He knew exactly who had left it. The next morning, he drove into town and showed the note to the tall officer again. The officer frowned. We can't arrest someone for leaving notes, but we'll keep it on record. If she breaks in again, call us right away. And if you feel unsafe, consider staying with someone else for a while?" Sam shook his head. "I won't be pushed out of my own home." The officer nodded slowly, understanding but concerned. Back at the cabin, Sam decided to prepare. He fixed stronger locks on the doors and secured the windows with wooden bars. He placed a motion light above the porch and another near the workshop. As he worked, he thought of his grandfather, who had built the cabin with his own hands. He imagined the old man's voice saying, "Protect what is yours. Stand firm." That night, Sam sat by the fire with a mug of coffee, listening to the forest. Hours passed in silence, until a faint crunch of leaves came from outside. He stood quickly, moving to the window. A shadow moved near the edge of the trees. Sam grabbed his flashlight and stepped onto the porch. "Who's out there?" he called firmly. The light cut across the trees. For a moment, he saw a figure, short hair, heavy coat, before it slipped deeper into the woods. "Karen," he muttered under his breath. He thought about chasing her but decided against it. The forest at night was too dangerous, and that was likely what she wanted to lure him out. Instead, he called the sheriff's office again. The younger officer answered and promised to send a patrol car through the area. The next day, Sam found another surprise. A large sign had been staked at the end of his driveway. Painted in red letters were the words, "Unsafe property. Keep out." His hands shook with anger as he pulled it out of the ground. She was trying to scare people away, maybe even convince the community that the cabin was dangerous. Later in town, he overheard two men talking outside the grocery store. "Did you hear about that cabin up on the ridge? Someone said it's falling apart, not fit to live in. HOA might shut it down." Sam clenched his teeth. Karen's lies were spreading. That evening, he sat on the porch, staring at the trees. He knew now that she would not stop with notes or signs. She wanted him gone, and she was willing to twist the truth to make it happen. The wind blew through the pines, carrying the sound of rustling leaves. Sam tightened his grip on the chair arms. He would not give up. This cabin was more than wood and stone. It was his family's history, his safe place, his right. As the sun set and shadows grew long, Sam prepared himself. He didn't know what Karen's next move would be, but he was certain of one thing. The real showdown was coming soon. The next morning, Sam woke to the sound of voices outside. He stepped onto the porch and saw two men in work vests unloading tools from a truck parked near his driveway. A bold sign on the side of the truck read "Pine Grove HOA Maintenance." Sam walked down the path. "What do you think you're doing?" One of the men looked up, surprised. "We were told to inspect this property. Said it's unsafe and needs to be cleared." "Who told you that?" Sam asked sharply. The man hesitated. "A woman from the HOA. Karen, I think." Sam's anger boiled, but he kept his voice steady. "This cabin is mine. You have no right to touch anything here. Leave now before I call the sheriff." The men exchanged uneasy glances, then packed their tools back into the truck. "Sorry, sir. We're just following orders." They drove away quickly, leaving Sam standing in the dust of the road. Sam knew this was it. Karen had taken her fight as far as it could go without crossing the law openly. But now she was pushing others into her plan. If he did not stop her soon, she might succeed in turning more people against him. That evening, he sat on the porch waiting. Sure enough, as the moon rose, he saw a figure moving along the tree line. This time, he was ready. "Karen," he called into the night. You don't need to sneak. Come out. The figure froze, then stepped into the clearing. It was Karen, her coat wrapped tightly around her, her eyes blazing. You don't belong here, she shouted. You don't care about this place. You leave it empty, wild, dangerous. I do more for this cabin than you ever have. Sam stood tall, his voice calm but firm. This cabin has stood for generations. My grandfather built it. My father cared for it. And now it is mine. You don't get to decide what belongs to me. Karen shook her head. The HOA will listen to me. They already see the truth. You'll be forced out. Sam stepped closer, pointing toward the cabin. The HOA has no power here. The board said so themselves. This is private property. You broke into my home, you used my things, you spread lies. Enough is enough. For a moment, Karen's face softened, almost like she wanted to argue less and explain more. But then her eyes hardened again. You can say what you want. I will never stop fighting. Sam pulled the folded notes from his pocket and held them up. These are in the sheriff's hands. Every threat, every sign, every break-in. If you step on this land again, it won't be an HOA meeting, it will be the law deciding your future. Karen's expression cracked. She took a step back, her mouth opening as if to protest, but no words came. The fight in her eyes dimmed, replaced by frustration and fear. At that moment, headlights appeared on the road. A patrol car pulled up, and the tall officer stepped out. Evening, he said, his tone steady. We got another call about trespassing. He looked at Karen. Ma'am, you've been warned before. Tonight it ends. You're coming with us. Karen's shoulders slumped, but she didn't argue. The officer guided her toward the car. She cast one last look at Sam, a mix of anger and defeat, before sliding into the back seat. The car drove off, its lights fading into the night. For the first time in weeks, the forest felt quiet again. Sam stood in the clearing, breathing slowly. The cabin behind him glowed warm with firelight, steady and strong. He knew the fight had tested him, but he had stood firm. Over the next few days, word spread in town. People spoke less of Karen's stories and more of her arrest. Some residents of Pine Grove even came by to shake Sam's hand, telling him they respected how he defended his rights. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Sam sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The cabin stood solid, just as it had for generations. He looked out at the forest, calm at last, and thought about the future. This was his home. No HOA, no neighbor, no outsider could take it from him. And as long as he lived, he would protect it.